Okay guys, our lesson today is to be able to order numbers that are written as fractions, decimals, and percents. All right. Our first example here, we want to be able to tell which is greater, 3/20ths or 16%. Now, the key here is to write each of these numbers in the same form, whether you choose to write them both as fractions, decimals, or percents. Well, if we have, so let's take a look at 3/20ths, right? And we're going to write each of these as a percent. So 3/20ths is a nice friendly fraction where we can make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. 20 times 5 is 100, right? So that's times 5. So this numerator, right, we have to multiply by 5 as well. So that's 15 out of 100. And we know that 16% is the same as 16 out of 100. So I can compare 15 out of 100 with 16 out of 100 when the numbers are written in the same form. So I see that 16% is greater than 15%, so 16% is greater than 3/20ths. All right? Here's another example, which is greater, 79% or 8/100ths. Now here, one number is written as a percent, the other is written as a decimal, and it's probably easiest here to write both as a percent. 8/100ths as a decimal is the same as 8% because when we go from decimal to percent, we slide the decimal place 2 places to the right. That is equivalent to multiplying the number by 100. So now we're comparing 79% with 2 places to the right, 8%. And we know that 79% is greater than 8%. Right? So once again, we have to write the numbers in the same form. Okay? 25%, we want to compare that with 7 over 25. Probably best to write each over a fraction of 100. So 25% is the same as 25 over 100. 7 over 25 is the same as what? This is times 4, so 28 over 100. Right? So 25% is 25 over 100. 7/25ths is 28 over 100, which is greater. 7/25ths is going to be greater, right? So it's going to be less than. Okay? 49/100ths and 94%. Let's write each of these as decimals or as percent. So 49/100ths, 0.49, is the same as 49%. 49% is going to be less than 94%. So which is greater? Your greater value is going to be the 94%. Okay, next example. You, your sister, and a friend each take the same number of shots at a soccer goal. You make 72% of your shots, your sister makes 19/25ths of her shots, and your friend makes 67/100ths of his shots. Who made the fewest shots? Once again, we have to write each of these numbers in the same form. Okay? So let's write them as fractions over 100. Because I have 19/25ths, I know I can make that easily a fraction over 100. 72%, I know I can make that a fraction of 72 over 100. 67/100ths, I know I can make that as a fraction of 67 over 100. So because I see this fraction with a denominator of 25, I know that I can make a fraction with a denominator of 100. So we have 72% is going to be 72 over 100. We know that 19 over 25, when I make it as a fraction over 100, that's times 4. 19 times 4 is what? 19 to 38, 76 over 100. And then we have 67/100ths. It's going to be 67 over 100. So who made the fewest shots? Well, your friend who made 67/100ths, that is the least value out of 100. Right? And we can see that when we write each of the values as a fraction over 100. Okay, our next example. You make 75% of your shots, your sister makes 13/20ths of her shots, and your friend makes 7/10ths of his shots. Who made the most shots? Well, once again, we have to write each in the same form. Because I have a fraction with a denominator of 20, that's easy to make a fraction with a denominator of 100, so we will do that. So let's start with 75%. That's going to be equal to 75 over 100. Then we have 13/20ths. I want to make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. So that's times 5. right? That's times 5. That's going to be what? 13 times 5 is 65 over 100. And then we have 7/10. Make that an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. That's going to be 70 over 100. So who made the most shots? You made the most shots with 75%. Okay? Next example. The map shows the portions of the U.S. population that live in 5 states. List the 5 states in order by population from least to greatest. Notice that the states' populations are given as fractions, right, as in the case of Washington and Ohio. Some are given as decimals, as in the case of Michigan and California. And New York is given as a percent. In order to be able to list the 5 states in order from least to greatest, we have to be able to compare using the same type of value, whether it's a fraction, whether it's a decimal, or a percent. So we're going to take our table and we're going to write each of the values. We're going to write the fraction, the decimal, and the percent for each value. Okay? So Michigan, we're given the decimal 3/100. As a percent, 3/100 is 3%. As a fraction, we'll write that as 3 out of 100. New York, we're given the percent, 6%. 6% as a fraction is 6 out of 100. And as a decimal, that's 6/100. Washington, we're given the fraction 1 out of 50. 1 out of 50 is the same as 2 out of 100. The percent for 2 out of 100 is 2%. The decimal would be 2/100. California, we're given what? 12/100 as a decimal. All right, 12/100 is the same as 12%. And as a fraction, that's going to be 12 out of 100. And then finally, Ohio, we're given a fraction 1/25. 1/25 is the same as 4 out of 100. 4 out of 100 is the same as 4%. And 4% is 4/100 as a decimal. Now that we have each state and their population in the form of a fraction, decimal, and a percent, we're able to list in order from least to greatest. So from least to greatest, we'll compare the percents. And Washington, right, we'll list Washington. Washington would be the least. Then we have Michigan. Then we'd have what? Ohio. Then we'd have New York. And then we'd have California from least to greatest. All right? The key being, write each form, fraction, decimal, and percent. And then we're able to compare. This next question says, well, the portion of the U.S. population that lives in Texas is 2/25. The portion that lives in Illinois is 42 thousandths. Reorder the states in example 3, including Texas and Illinois. Now, I'm not making my students do that, but we certainly can find the fraction, the decimal, and the percent for Texas. So Texas would be 2 out of 25, right, which is the same as what? 8 out of 100. And 8 out of 100 we know is 8%. And 8% we know is, right, 8/100 as a decimal. We know Illinois, written as a decimal, is 0.042. As a percent, that's 4.2%. And as a fraction, that's going to be 4.2 over 100. All right? Let's continue. All right, we're going to go to the next page because that problem's there as well. Mr. H's class, 20% of the students own roller shoes. In Mr. T's class, 5 out of 29 students own roller shoes. In which class does the greater fraction of students own roller shoes? So we have Mr. H's class, 20%, right? And that's, we'll leave it as 20%. Mr. T's, right, we have 5 out of 29. Well, 5 out of 29 is, a fraction with a denominator that's not a factor of 100. So here it's appropriate to use a calculator to divide 5 and 29 to get the decimal equivalent for 5 out of 29, and that's about 17%. So by using the division, we're able to see that the larger portion of students that own the roller shoes would be Mr. H's class at 20%. All right? Okay. Next example. In second period, right, P2, we have 37.5% of students like to bowl. In period 5, so P5, we have 12 out of 29. Well, once again, we want to use that same method to find the percent of students that like to bowl. So we can take our calculators and divide 12 by 29, and we get approximately 41%. All right? The class with the greater fraction then would be the period 5 class, because period 5 is 41%, period 2 being the 37.5%. All right? We continue. Okay? Last problem we're going to take a look at. Nolan is the quarterback on a football team. He completed 67% of his passes in the first game. He completed 64 hundredths passes, 3/5, and 69% of his passes in the next 3 games. List Nolan's completed passing numbers from least to greatest. Well, once again, we want to write everything in the same form, and because I have 2% and I have a decimal, well, let's use a fraction with a denominator of 100, because 3/5 is an easier fraction to make with a denominator of 100. So we know 67%, it's going to be 67 out of 100. We know that 69% is going to be 69 out of 100. We know that 64 hundredths is going to be 64 out of 100. And we know that 3/5, if we make an equal fraction with a denominator of 100, right, that's times, denominator of 100, let's do that, 3/5, denominator of 100, that's times 20, so that's going to be 60 out of 100. So from least to greatest, we use the original values. 3/5 would be the least. Then we have 64 hundredths would be next. 64 hundredths would be next. Then we have 67% and the 69%. All right. Well, that's the end of the lesson. Just remember to be able to use values in the fraction form, decimal form, and percent form. All right. Hopefully that was helpful, and we'll see you soon.